Now, when it comes to selecting the right phone for you, it's often the question about the camera, the battery, software experience, and more. But there's another factor, and that's size. And then the question is, how much does that size sacrifice in terms of the camera? Let's discuss the Vivo X300 versus the X300 Pro and see how they stack up against each other to see whether the sacrifices made on the X300 are worth it or whether you should simply go for the X300 Pro. Let's find out in this video. Let's begin with the main sensor. The Pro carries a 50 megapixel sensor, while the regular X300 jumps all the way up to that 200 megapixel resolution, the very same sensor that the Pro uses as its periscope. We're looking at an f-stop of 1.6 on the Pro versus a 1.7 on the X300. A 1/1.28 sensor size on the Pro versus a 1/1.4 inch sensor size on the X300. And then it's 24mm equivalent on the Pro versus a little bit wider 23mm equivalent on the regular model. So let's have a look at results first when it comes to the main camera. With daytime photography, the similarities are obvious. Both phones deliver a nearly identical color profile, with only minor shifts in shadows and highlights, subtle differences that rarely matter in real-life shooting. Overall, you will see that same style on both of them. However, with some shots inside the Polaris low, there are some distinctions that can start emerging. Light sources often appear a little bit brighter on the X300, with more presence of that kind of punch I like when it comes to my light sources. It enhances the mood of the image, even in occasions a small difference in colors. But it's important to know that these cases are pretty limited. There are plenty of moments where the X300 and the Pro are matching perfectly. Swap the watermarks and most people wouldn't be able to tell them apart. With the main sensor, it's pretty obvious that it's the same brand and the same philosophy behind the camera itself. The results sit close to each other. And if you look purely at this part, I think they're surprisingly close to each other. But naturally, there are some differences in low light as well. Now, one thing to keep in mind when it comes to the periscope comparison is that there is a difference in focal length. We get 70mm equivalent on the Vivo X300 versus 85 on the X300 Pro. And therefore, if I would want to make it 85 versus 85, I would need to crop in on the X300 and therefore sacrifice some of the image quality that you would get. So I would focus mainly on the comparison when it comes to the periscope on 70 versus 85mm equivalent. Showcase the strength comparing to each other, showcasing how both of them perform natively. But let's look at the hardware first. Here is where the megapixel actually shifts. The X300 now has the 200 megapixel resolution, while the X300 drops to a 50 megapixel resolution. The Pro uses that same 1/1.4 inch sensor size that we've seen on the X300 as its main sensor, while the X300 relies on a smaller 1/1.95 inch sensor size. Respectable nonetheless. Aperture comes at an f-stop of 2.7 on the Pro, where it's a 2.6 on the regular model, and then 85mm equivalent on the Pro versus 70mm on the X300. Naturally, when you look at the photos, the X300 delivers a more natural detailed shot and overall stronger performance, especially when zooming in past its native range, like for instance this water fountain. Though I will say that the Pro actually kinda can look too sharp in cases like these, but the X300 simply doesn't match the quality of detail here. Staying at their intended zoom levels without pixel peeping beyond what the phone is really meant for, the X300 still performs respectably. And while AI Assistant can be used when zooming in, you can also turn this off. If you've seen some strange looking faces and results that you can get when using AI, and that means that they have AI on, you can simply turn that off as stated. However, these quality differences can extend in low light as well. But again, for a smaller, more compact device, the X300 holds its own quite remarkably. But realistically, when it comes to that periscope, this is where the X300 Pro stands apart from the X300. That being said, again, the X300 is still really good at it. The ultra-wide, however, is a different story, mainly because there is no story. If you see my comparison with the X200 Ultra and the X300 Pro, you know that the ultra-wide isn't that strong when it comes to the X300 and X300 Pro, especially if you compare it to something like that X200 Ultra. It's hard to go back to something that uses a 1/2.76 in sensor size, and that is what both are using here. The same counts for the f-stop of 2.0 and of course 15mm equivalent for both as well, with a 15 megapixel resolution. There is no real difference between them. Yes, the X300 can occasionally appear more softer, but in practical use, these ultra cameras behave nearly identical. With the same sensor, same processor, same color science, and of course that size partnership, there is simply very little I can comment on when it comes to the ultra-wide. So rather to explain it more, I'll let you just look at the images and judge for yourself, because in most cases, they are pretty similar to each other, once again. While I think that a portrait shot is really nice around that 70-75mm equivalent focal length, it's also here where you can tell that the X300 Pro simply has a superior sensor when it comes to that periscope. The native 85mm equivalent naturally zooms in a bit more, but also retains a bit more details, and it does allow a bit more extra zoom as well compared to the X300 that is limited to 100mm equivalent, where the X300 Pro allows up to 135mm equivalent when using portrait mode. They both have a bit of a tendency to soften the skin a little bit more, but these were models using a lot of makeup, so it's not the easiest to judge that side. I think I need to find someone pretty old to get a really good indication on that smoothening effect. Now, while the X300 and X300 Pro both support 4K 120 frames per second, the X300 Pro allows it on the main sensor and the periscope, where with the X300 it is only allowed on the main sensor.
Both recording in 4K 60 frames per second. Actually, no, okay, it's just the display is bigger. It looked like the X300 Pro zoomed in more. It definitely looks like it, but probably illusion. Going to the ultra wide. It's a little bit windy, but not a lot. 2 times versus 2.7. And back to the main. Colors look very similar, just a little bit more contrast on the X300, at least Pro, at least on the phone itself. Naturally, it could be different when it comes to the final files because of display calibration. Front-facing camera, both starting at the widest, I assume. Both are the same, so 20 millimeters versus 20 millimeters. Honestly, they look very similar. Maybe a little bit more softening on the X300 compared to the more sharpening on the X300 Pro. Let's go to 25mm equivalent. Again, just very similar. Maybe a little bit better dynamic range on that side on the X300 Pro, but apart from that, you know, here and there some slight color differences, but that could also be again because of display calibration. 4K 60 frames per second on both. Starting with the main sensor, really in this nice kind of reflective surface because of the rain. Let's go to the ultra wide. So they should be quite similar because they're basically the same sensor. If they aren't perfectly the same sensor, this is 3 times versus 3.7 times, so 85mm equivalent versus 73. Let's go around a little bit. Alright, back to main sensor. Let's walk a little bit again. Let's walk a little bit with the ultra wide as well. And with the zoom, let's see. They seem both on the phone quite stable, and of course holding it with one hand, so you will get a little bit more of jitter effect. Ninja Walk is less effective. Now 4K 30 frames per second, which means a little bit more light can be allocated per each frame. So let's see if it makes any difference at all. And these things are quite cool for humanistic mode. But I will say, in daytime, they look really bad, these things that are right there. Cannot point at it, but yeah, you get what I'm saying. And let's quickly zoom in as well to showcase that. 4K 60 frames per second with the front-facing camera, both the X300 and X300 Pro. Using the widest, so I assume both are 20mm equivalent. Okay, let's go to then the one time. See a little bit, let's see if I can get that. Seems quite similar. Little color difference. But apart from that, a bit more contrast to the X300 Pro, I'd say.
So at the end, when it comes to a comparison like this, I don't think the people are asking which one would win. The Vivo X300 Pro clearly wins here, but I don't think, again, that is the question. I think the question really is how close the X300 gets to the X300 Pro and whether the performance has the right sacrifices. And realistically, I think it does. When it comes to a phone comparison like this, as stated, it's more than just the camera itself. It's the question whether you have a lot of sacrifices to get a more compact phone. And sure, you have some sacrifices, but I think with the X300, I think you get a really good sacrifice for getting a more compact phone with still great camera hardware. So at the end, what do you think about the comparison between the Vivo X300 and X300 Pro? What is your opinion about the sacrifices made to get a more compact body? For myself, again as stated, I think they made the right choice here when it comes to those sacrifices that you will get with a phone like that. And I think the X300 is really capable and in cases just performs like the X300 Pro. Either way, before we leave, I really want to thank my members. Thank you so much for the support you guys have been giving me. Of course, if you want to become a member, you can by clicking join somewhere below, and WoW files for personal use will be available for you as well because of that. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this video, and of course don't forget to like and subscribe so we hit 30,000 subscribers before the end of the year. It's a nice birthday present if we hit that 30k on my birthday as well, the 1st of January. Either way, hope you enjoyed this video and talk to you guys in the next.